A key phrase of the course is less is more. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I think this is something that I can relate to a lot, and it's really managing to create a lot out of a very small input. I remember when I did my MA, and my course tutor Mike Breen said, "You can teach English off the back of a cornflake packet. You just take a little bit of text as a prompt, and then get the people who are there to talk about it, and then ask more questions, which takes it further." And one of the people who's influenced dogma, I think, is Earl Stevick, who talks about working with the people in the room, that the most interesting things that happen are actually between the people in the room, rather than lots of things that you bring in. And I think on this course that we've just been through, it was very good that we went to the Surf Museum on the first day, which is in Braunton, and a very small museum, really. I don't know if you've been in many museums as small as that, but actually focused on this area, local things, about the history of surfing, and very much in keeping with the philosophy of our course, really. You know, that it was a little prompt, and as a result of that little prompt, 5 people on Sunday went off to Croyd Bay and went surfing and had the time of their lives. So it's kind of taking little things, or like what we did today in class, which was actually working with a song that we had last night, which was about Dublin and about things changing and somebody not completely happy with the changes in Dublin. And then we went into it a little bit deeper. We watched it again and thought about it with a bit more, and then brought other texts to it, other songs to it, which were about the same thing, but basically still working with a little bit, one song, but then going deeper with it. I mean, you've always got to be careful not that people don't get bored, that it's not too much with it, but really I think the principle of less is more, and space, and allowing a course to breathe, and having lots of room there for reflection on what happens, instead of cramming a course full of inputs, which is often the case on summer courses, that people, ministries, want X number of hours in order to give certificates, and then of course the course can't breathe properly because there isn't any time for real digestion and reflection, which I think we've done quite well on. It could be better, but I think that we've gone a long way. We've gone a lot further, let's put it that way, a lot further than I have before. And of course, less is more comes from Mies van der Rohe, the famous architect, who was based in Central Europe and created some of the most wonderful modernist buildings at the beginning of the 1930s.
When we were training this week, I shared an article that Scott posted years ago on the original Teaching Unplugged website, which is by Sylvia Ashton Warner, who's one of the educators whose works he brought into the dogma discussion very early on. And this article quotes her writing in her book Teacher about when she got rid of all her own self-made materials. She didn't just get rid of the course book, which she'd found was irrelevant, or the course books, but she also stopped using the bank of materials that she personally built up over the years, as many of us do as teachers, because she judged it to be not fully relevant to the people she was teaching, but actually preventing them using the full extent of their intelligence from developing their own cognitive processes. And she describes the benefit of throwing the learner back on their own resources, and using few materials and asking perhaps more acute questions is one way to do that. And I drew this parallel between the excessive use of materials in the language classroom and the way that the publishers of children's books are now producing books of famous children's stories which are already illustrated, but which still require a kind of leap of faith on the part of the child reader to imagine a real Gruffalo or real wild things in Maurice Sendak's book, Where the Wild Things Are. And these books are now being produced with a Gruffalo toy that comes with the book. So suddenly, in my imagination, the child has less opportunity to create this creature, even though there are illustrations, but to imagine the size or the feel of this creature, and is merely presented with it. The same in Where the Wild Things Are. You know, the wild things are, however big they are, in the child's imagination, and they're imaginary creatures. The whole point of that book is that they are imaginary creatures, and yet that children are now being given this physical object as if you can't imagine anything on your own. And I said it would be ridiculous. I know they're not illustrated books, but it would be silly to have a new edition of Wuthering Heights with a Heathcliff doll. You know, we don't need a Heathcliff doll to imagine Heathcliff. And the great thing is that we all imagine a different Heathcliff because it draws on our resources, and we are, as human beings, resourceful and creative and imaginative, and we need to make space so that those qualities can be developed in the classroom, rather than trying to control the way those qualities are expressed. It's a great article. It's about a guy who was an English language teacher and who picked up on the book Teaching Unplugged and, you know, found it exciting, and it changed the way he taught. But actually, he'd always wanted to work in museums, and so when he did move into museums, he wondered if he could take some of the ideas of Teaching Unplugged with him. And he did, and he has this to say: I think the unplugged ethos can be translated and made relevant for museums. Rather than cram in as many artifacts, texts, games, audio visuals and interactives into a space, get the basics right. Curate to a minimum. The job of the curator is surely not to overwhelm visitors, but to pique their interest. Provide the tools that are necessary for visitors to dig deeper. Treat visitors as partners in your project, not lemmings. After all, museums should not be in the business of lecturing, but of empowering. And I find that very exciting, that the ethos of Unplugged makes sense in another field. But of course it's not surprising, because the ethos of Unplugged was formed by references from other fields like architecture and Mies van der Rohe and so on. It still made me happy.